A very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. What an incredible turnout we have. Thank you for joining us for our first Focus on Wellness webinar. We are delighted to have such an incredible turnout, and we look forward to an informative and thought-provoking 90 minutes with you. My name is Liz Moore. I am a strategic wellness consultant for the Focus Group, a human capital management consultancy that's based in Forest Town in Johannesburg. Our slogan, "People are our focus," highlights our extreme passion for what we do. From assisting businesses to invest in and manage their employees better, to coaching individuals to develop into the best versions of themselves possible, for us, understanding, leading, and managing the human element of business, especially in these unprecedented times, is a critical success factor. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, the world was changing rapidly, both in terms of broad global trends that were driving businesses and the more immediate space around our day-to-day lives. Enter COVID-19, and the rate of change has been with an emphasis on the necessity to a new way of business and life, brought about by the need for social distancing in response to the pandemic. The exponential pace of change in technologies and the necessity to adopt these technologies to meet our needs and pursue our goals has become a matter of survival. In some ways, this makes us richer and more empowered than ever before. In other ways, it completely unsettles us. This is one of the paradoxes of life in the 21st century, that while the world changes rapidly, our basic needs as humans hasn't actually shifted drastically at all. In some ways, we struggle to keep up with the very world that we have created and continue to create. While it is a time filled with increasing challenges, so too are opportunities for reinvention and evolution. Today, more than ever, we are faced with extreme tensions, creating these complex juxtapositions. We have the sense of boundless options for some on one hand, and the awareness of limited time for most of us on the other. The sense of having just missed something and the fear of missing more, or FOMO. The expectation of on-demand everything and that appeal for the slow, bespoke, handmade. And most relevant for today, and the theme that lays the foundation for our first Focus on Wellness webinar, it's the hyperconnection and the loss of connection brought about by COVID-19 pandemic and our forced social distancing and isolation to ensure our and our nation's health. So in response to this critical theme, we assembled a team of wellness practitioners to assist in laying the foundation for a new blueprint, which offers guidance to business leaders and individuals alike on how to navigate this uncharted territory. I'm extremely proud to be working with the Focus on Wellness team and look forward to the next 90 minutes during which we will both share theoretical and practical knowledge to allow you to lead both your teams and yourselves through lockdown and beyond. Now, before we kick off, just a few house rules and meeting guidelines. Firstly, we hope you have some water and a healthy snack or two at hand to keep you hydrated and fueled through the webinar. Also a pen and paper to jot down notes and questions that you may have for our team. We ask that you keep your microphones muted, please, and communicate using the chat feature. We have 5 topics that we are going to address, and I'm going to reveal them there. Right, so we have 5 topics. As you can see, we are operating from the organizational strategic level. We then move down into the teams level and then down to the individual. And the order of our events will be as follows. We will look at working in uncertain times. We then go into organizational resilience. Then we have a Q&A. We then look at leading virtual teams, which will also be followed by a Q&A. And then we look at the individual, so the mental, physical, and nutritional wellness of the individual. And we look at how do we maximize human potential. During the webinar, we will also be asking questions via the very cool polling feature. So please keep an eye out for those. And lastly, we invite you to sit back and relax while tuning in and enjoy. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. That's James Gower. He's a dynamic psychologist who has extensive experience working with corporates to develop and manage employee wellness programs. He's also going to give us an overview of the psychology of the organization as a result of COVID. And he's then going to spend some time unpacking how this affects us and what we can do to improve our mental and our emotional states during this time. Over to you, James.
Okay, hi guys. Hey guys, we are certainly working in uncertain times. Now, firstly, what I'm going to look at is the psychology of the organization. The global COVID-19 pandemic has fast become the biggest global event of our lifetime. Our experiences as customers, employees, citizens, and humans are forever changed, and our attitudes and behaviors are changing as a result. Once the immediate threat has passed, what will need to have changed, both in the way we think and behave? If any organization wants to survive and have a future vision, they will have to change. They will have to build, design, communicate, and run their business staff and the way they do this. We have already and will continue to enter the virtual workplace. Anything that can be done virtually will be done virtually. The workplace has changed forever, and this is probably a good thing. The ones that come out on top will be those that explore, test, implement, and adjust the creative possibilities to that of themselves, with their employees and their clients. As people, we are now focused on the self and our own personal environment, sitting at home especially. It will be difficult to adjust or change this view, and employees will rightfully ask, if we could do it then and it worked, why can't we do it now, of course, after the pandemic is over, especially if successful strategies are put in place. As companies also now focus on their staff and their well-being, this trend will be the way of the future. Know your staff, be interested, and they will feel valued and want to stay with you. The time of, if the big corporate is over, the time of the caring parental organization has started. Now I'm going to look at the psychology of the individual. Now, obviously, we all suffer from fear at this stage. As human beings, we naturally fear a contagion and work uncertainty. Anything that threatens our well-being, we run from or attack. Our anxiety becomes tightened, and our fear response becomes basic and is almost expected. We return to our primal instincts of fight or flight. However, as we are in the digital or social media era, we are constantly bombarded by Facebook, the internet, Twitter, WhatsApp groups, TV, and newspapers. Now, most of you will know that some of the groups that you've joined, etc., there's false news and so on, and it continues and continues. This bombardment with a negative wave of information overwhelms us and makes us even more anxious. Now, what do we need to do? We need to focus. We need to, however, focus on what is important, see a way forward, and not allow us to become engulfed in the negativity and fear that is so hard trying to overwhelm us. This focus includes our families, households, finances, work environment, and companies. As an individual, we are also responsible for creating a productive work environment. We need to embrace the different roles we are now fulfilling: mother and father, husband and wife, parents, caretakers, employees, employers. And so many of us have neglected some of those roles, which COVID has maybe now forced us to get into. And guess what? There's no escape. You're in a jail, you're in lockdown. But utilize the change to create something better. Eventually, we will thrive in multitasking. Change is never easy, and humans and organizations don't like change. But change often brings new processes, that are streamlined and work out better for the future. Embrace the change and make yourself valued. Now, I'm also going to look at the new or the home work environment. Obviously, it looks a bit different from driving 40 minutes in the traffic to work and driving 40 minutes back home, clocking in at the office and following instructions until you leave. Now, currently, I suggest that, however, you still continue with a routine. It is essential to establish a routine at home. Start the day with something specific. Continue specific time slots allocated to those specific tasks. From helping the kids to be entertained, remember the multitasking, to the meeting you have with your area manager. It comes down to basic time management, prioritization, and good work ethic. Plan your day, plan your work, plan your family. Now, with this, of course, we need structure, which goes hand in hand. If we do not have structure, the whole situation will fall apart, and then we will just have more anxiety. Create a structure in which you set up goals and tasks which you intend to do for the day, for yourself and for your family members. Remember, it's not just ourselves, we have to deal with everybody else around us. This hopefully will create cohesion and help people who are under lockdown with work better together. If someone knows what is expected, giving them a task, for example, they have a bigger chance of fulfilling that expectation. Now, during all of this, communication is very important. During this time, we need to communicate with work, our families, friends, and whomever else you might find on that list. You're not just going to run into them, you're not allowed to. Ensure that your communication feed, Twitter, WhatsApp groups, etc., are only checked at certain times. That ping that goes off every now and again, refrain from listening to it or checking it, etc. It's going to drive you bonkers. The human being is not psychologically able to cope with so much negativity and a bombardment of information which may or may not be true. I'm sure some of you have seen the fake news, etc. Obama and a thing that is sent to the world, and that people must not take it because it's poisonous, etc., etc. Now, a few rules to help with communication. Okay, hold on there. I just wanna. Okay, yeah. Okay. Ignore the negative news and establish sources that are credible. If all else fails, stick to one important rule. If I can't change it, I stay busy and I change I work with what I can change. Currently, your household, children, health, safety, work if you are able to work from home, and of course, the so important schedule. Now, a few rules that will help with communication. Check your emails and social media at specific times. Check in with your team or co-workers via Zoom, Skype, and give and ask for feedback. However, don't overdo the Skype, Zoom, and telephone calls. If you can send an email to communicate something, rather do that. We've all sat in meetings in the past and sat there for 6-7 hours and thought, actually an email would have been better. Avoid what you cannot change and focus on what you can. Don't send and read messages sent to you when you feel like it. When they come through, rather allocate time for it. Make calls that are important and avoid those that are not, especially with work. Always have the goal in mind with your communication. Then use which avenue is best to accomplish that task, not what is most convenient. Okay, now see this as a time to reconnect to family and friends. Reestablish what may have been lost in the past, and maybe there's a long lost friend that you can make contact with again. Now, of course, during all of this, because we're sitting home, we have children, we have whatever that's going on around us, multitask, multitask, multitask. Employees who are lucky enough to be able to work from home now also have to deal with a change in workflow processes, which are often also on a trial and error basis, as managers also struggle to cope with this. Added to that, the management of the whole home or work environment also comes into play. Multitasking is now a skill that is essential to our survival and not just limited to the gifted, previously known as women. We have to learn to adopt or to adapt to this environment and continue living healthy, balanced, and productive lives. We are forced to perform multiple tasks which we are often not used to. Managing the individual. During my research and with a lot of Skype sessions that I've done with individuals, two main types of people or employees have come to the foreground. The ones that are extremely bored and overwhelmed, and the ones that are overworked and overwhelmed. So obviously being overwhelmed is one of the things. Boredom for those with industries that aren't thriving and they need to stay at home, and then those who are part of essential or health services or who can work from home and are also overworked. All these individuals, whether at home or working, are however stressed. One from decreased workload and feeling of lack of purpose, the other from increased workload and a feeling of being completely overwhelmed. Then we have the added bonus of the concern and worry as to how to live during and post Corona or COVID-19. Worries include those around the implications of the virus, impacts on health, finances, and lots of stress. Stress for workers and employers are the headline of every day. There is uncertainty. Uncertainty creates fear, which causes anxiety, depression, and many other ugly critters. If anxiety isn't at the forefront, we are bored as we are in a cage. We cannot do what we want, when we want, and as we want, which causes more frustration. Now, most of all, don't be scared to ask for help. There are helplines. There are EAP programs which you can access usually through your company. And many psychologists and therapists who work on an online basis. Also speak to family, friends, and even co-workers to just offload or have a bit of a chat. Now, just a bit of a summary and practical tips. Set goals and tasks, not just for yourself, but for family members, and stick to them as far as possible. Next point, as I said before, and I hope I can't stress that enough, multitask, men and women alike. Check in both with work and family and friends. Now, with that quick check in, that can be with work, basically checking that what the goal is for the day, what the goal is for the week, what project we're working on, where everybody is, etc. Ignore the bombardment of negative news. Communicate when needed in the best way to suit the goal. Remember, this too shall pass. The golden rule, always, if you can't change it, don't worry about it. Even if you start playing Scrabble or whatever, if you can't change it, don't worry about it. It's just going to freak you out. Okay, and that's it for me.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, James. Our next speaker is William van Aarde. He's an industrial and organizational psychologist and a talent management expert, specializing in coaching businesses to success by aligning the individual, the jobs, and the organization in the industry. He's going to speak to us about resilience, how this can be achieved both organizationally and individually, and how we can measure various aspects of resilience in order to map and track progression towards specific strategic goals. Over to you, William.
Right, in this particular section, we are going to talk about organizational resilience as a whole. What is it all about? What are the key requirements? And also, how can an organization achieve a level of resilience that will ensure that the company survives not only this pandemic, but also coming out stronger on the other side. We're also going to look at personal resilience or individual resilience and see the connection with that into the organization. And then I've got exciting news for you, but only for you that stays till the end. I'm only joking. It's a survey that actually will allow you to gauge how your employees are dealing with the current situation and also to what degree they feel supported and equipped to carry on working from home. And then we will end that with specific talent management service offerings that can assist you to transition this particular process or period, but also to make sure that you are looking at your organization from a people perspective, making sure that you have the right competencies on board, not only for now, but also for the future. As was mentioned, yes, this COVID-19 will definitely pass, but the question is, what do we do in the meantime? Can we afford just to sit back and hope that things will magically just turn around with us just viewing from the outside? No, obviously not. We cannot. We need to become proactive. It actually asks for drastic measures so that we can actually survive this whole pandemic, but also make sure that the company is robust turning into the future in order to achieve our business goals. So then let's have a look then at the definition that we can have a look here at for organizational resilience. It says that it is the ability of an organization to anticipate, to prepare for, to respond and adapt to incremental change, but also sudden disruptions like the COVID-19 in order to survive and prosper. And there are key words in this particular definition that I just want to highlight. And you can see that they are all verbs, action words. We need to anticipate. We need to prepare for. We need to respond and adapt. Why do we need to do that? So that we can move through this difficult, uncharted territory and survive this, but also make sure that we prosper down the line. The key requirements for organizational resilience, there are many. This is just one model that one can have a look at from an organizational perspective. Leadership, obviously, they need to come to the party. They need to be in control of this particular situation. The message that leadership within an organization need to send through the ranks is we are in control. We are giving our best. We are looking at the future. We are future focused. We are positive. That's the message that needs to be communicated at this particular point in time. They need to be visibly leading the organization. Obviously, the organizational culture is also going to change and have a major impact in the way that we are doing business, not only now, but also into the future. And we've seen that with so many of companies around the world. Zoom, for instance, all of a sudden there's a major shift towards virtual meetings. Companies that were not doing well, all of a sudden are doing exceptionally well within these extreme times. Companies who, for a very large extent, were reliant on people and masses of people. Aviation industries, transportation industries, hotel, you can name it, tourism. The way within which they're going to look at their own business and the way within which they're going to engage with their customers are going to change rapidly. We also need to then make sure, obviously, that we have the right systems in place to make sure that we deal with the challenges, but also be able to achieve our business results and objectives. People as a foundation within organizations need to be resilient. How do we get them to that particular point so that they can steer the organization in the right direction and achieve the successes that we want them to achieve. We need to revisit our people component and the systems as a whole. Do we have the right people on board with the right competencies? Obviously, we talked about the workplace and how that is going to change. Also, working from an office environment is completely different from working from home. All of a sudden, new ways, as James explained, new ways of doing things, new ways of looking at our working environment. So these are key elements that we need to consider in making sure that we move the organization from where we currently are into a resilient organization. Looking at the market changes, obviously it's going to impact majorly on our business strategy. It will be required for us to drastically revisit the business strategy that we have. Sometimes we need to make a clean cut and change completely in terms of the direction that we are. Obviously, we know that structure always follows strategy. It's going to impact on the operations within the organization. The business way within which, or the way within which we do business is going to change. It will change the structures. It will change the competencies required from within those particular structures. So in order to achieve that business goals, we need to make sure that from a people perspective, that there's alignment in terms of systems and policies and procedures and processes. But that is focusing now, although we are focusing now on the people side, we also need to make sure that our supply chain, for instance, our procurement systems, our operational systems, our delivery systems, sales and marketing systems, all of that need to be realigned to this new business strategy that we have now mapped out within our company. Looking at it from a people perspective, we are going to talk about later on, also from a policy perspective. How does this influence your HR and talent management policies? What competencies do we require? What new developments need to take place in order to build our talent pools and reskill sometimes our people so that we can achieve one thing at the end of the day, and that is to reach our business objectives. So that becomes a critical part. So from the market context, the market changes that we now need to take into account, will come out this new revisited strategy. Now that strategy is, if we map it down or break it down to the smaller parts, becomes results. And we need to be able to achieve those results. But how can we achieve those results? Only by finding meaning in what type of behaviors will drive those results. Once we understand what the behaviors are, we can actually assess our staff and our whole talent team or complement to make sure that the right behaviors are in place, that the right competencies are there. Different positions require different type of personality traits or personalities. We need to look at the skills of our people. We need to look at the attributes. So that in itself is looking at the organization as a whole in order to achieve resilience. The question is always asked, but what is the connection now with personality or personal resilience versus organizational resilience? And we know that the organization is made up of our biggest asset, and that is people, because people bring value to the organization. They need to be able to remain resilient. So the organization's resilience is directly linked to the individual's resilience. So we build that cornerstone, build that foundation of strong people with the right competencies that can assist us in meeting our strategic objectives. So what is the key here? We need to be able to identify within our teams, working now all of a sudden from home, who are the people that that is now actually taking the ship forward? Who are the stars that are standing out? Who are the real leaders within our teams coming forward? We nurture them, we need to build them, and we need to reskill and redeploy, if needs be, from within the organization. A lovely model that I want to share with you in terms of where we find ourselves, either as organizations or as individuals, is in terms of the Kubler-Ross change curve. Now, this is from a change perspective very relevant to what we are experiencing at this point in time. The first messages of COVID-19 coming from China late last year, all of a sudden the world stand in shock to say, but what is happening? Is this really happening to us? Can it come through to our borders? In South Africa, we're so far removed from China, and then move into that phase of denial. No, but it's not going to affect us. It's going to stay there. All of a sudden to hear that now we are also experiencing a lockdown, and the realization is coming so close to home to say, but yes, it's actually going to affect us as well. And it can have a major impact, and it will have a major impact on us as well. And that often leads us to this stage of depression where we feel that the mood is so low that we feel angry about what is happening and how dare they do this to us, and how this is going to affect our business. How are we going to survive? All those negative thoughts that James was also talking about is now coming through, up to that particular point where we can feel completely hopeless. Now, the sad part is that very often either individuals or the organization find themselves in that stage, and that they remain there for very, very long periods in time. Now, the good news is that it can be managed. One can move up into the experiment and the decision-making phase, where we start to explore, where we get new energy, where we regenerate ourselves and rethink our own thinking and our own behavior to move up into the curve, where we start to explore new possibilities. Everything is not doom and gloom. There are glimmers of hope. Can we actually achieve this? Yes, we can. We mobilize the teams. Although they are now sitting in remote areas, working from home, we still have the technology and also the ability to mobilize our team, to get them involved, to explore, to tap into the talent within our teams, to make that happening or make that successful. So we share decisions and we discuss and we explore to move into this change with renewed energy and renewed organizations and individuals. So the question is, where do you find yourself currently? Ask yourself this question from an organizational perspective. Where are we? In which phase or stage are we? Are we in denial about the current situation? Are we frustrated? Are we depressed? Or are we already out of that doom and gloom stage that we have moved into the next phase of taking charge proactively of the situation? We motivate our people so that we can start to achieve. Also from an individual level, where do you find yourself currently? If you're at any one of the points, please also understand that you probably will move up and down this curve very frequently. Today I feel very psyched up and good energy and positive about it. Tomorrow I may be back into depression again. And then I move up into the next stage. So it's maybe one step back, but 2 steps forward. One step back, 2 steps forward. And the golden rule here is engage, engage, engage. Don't isolate yourself, but engage on a continuous basis. Personal resilience, very important. I like to tie in emotional intelligence also here. What is emotional intelligence all about? It is my ability as an individual to socially relate to other people. So in other words, my interpersonal relationships with other people. Although this is now from a remote perspective, it is not that I now am isolating myself. I still need to engage. I now still need to show empathy, but I need to now do it in a different manner. So looking at a camera, all of a sudden I can see that my colleague there is doing this or doing that, or asking questions. How does it go with you? What are the challenges that you're currently facing within your home environment? Share experiences, share knowledge. But the best part, in order for me to be able to relate well to others, I first need to be able to relate well to myself. So therefore, self-awareness. I need to be able to have my finger on the pulse in terms of my own emotions. So whenever there are negativities or dangers creeping up, I need to be able to spot that in order to regulate it, to become motivated again. So you can see how emotional intelligence also forms part of this bigger picture of becoming personally or individually resilient. And that individual that is resilient will strengthen the organization as a whole, for the organization to become resilient as well. Now, here's the good news. I told you earlier on, we've got excellent or exciting news for you. So please sit a bit closer. I'm going to talk soft now so that you can hear what it is that I'm saying. This is a free, no obligation survey that we are putting out there to all organizations of any size that wants to participate in this. There will be weekly surveys coming out, short surveys, about 18 or so questions, where you can now gauge where your people are in terms of this whole transition phase, how they are dealing with it, but also to what degree do they feel that they are supported, and also that they can carry on working from home. So it is an ideal opportunity for any organization to get involved with their people, to gauge where they are. And immediately, once you send out that survey, get feedback from your clients or from your staff. And immediately, once all the information is in, there will be a dashboard giving you immediate feedback in terms of where you are. I personally think this is a great opportunity for the companies to get involved in and to be in control of this particular situation. There are areas that will be covered within that particular survey: resources, needs during transition, long-term adaptation of working from home, virtual teams, thriving with the virtual teams, how to create that, where are you? And the beauty of these surveys is that from the survey, you will be able to plan strategic interventions within your team to make sure that you stay on top, that you will not only survive, but also prosper at the end of the day. And we can definitely assist you in that as well. There's some other services that we can offer you in terms of, maybe you sit there and you think from a people perspective, what else do we need to do? How do we need to do it differently? We can assist you in revisiting your talent management strategies. We can also assist you with our online assessments to make sure that you have the right people doing the right job at the right time. And there we can look at a whole range of possibilities, from cognitive assessments to personality, behavioral competencies, etc., etc. So it's very important that we need to be able to deal with it. Just from a leader perspective, as we said earlier on, leaders need to take charge of situation. And there are 4 areas that they need to be in control of. They need to be able to manage themselves or lead themselves. They need to lead their people successfully. They need to lead tasks, and they also need to lead this change and lead the way. Also, we can assist you with your team strength and determine where they are, your team, what type of roles they play, and how successful they are. Right, this is just a quick indication in terms of the leadership profile that we can do through assessment. We can really map your people to see your leaders, to see where they are, where their strengths are, where their development areas are, and we can also group that and to say that from a group perspective, this is where the leadership team is, and it will also identify their strengths and development areas. Likewise for your team. Are your team, within your team, are they perfecters? Are they pragmatists? Are they catalysts? Or what type of role do they play? Where are the gaps within our team that we need to strengthen so we can get those people on board as well? So this is just some of the examples that we can assist you with. Obviously from within the organization, from a development perspective, we can assist you with personal development plan formulation. We can assist you with coaching and training. All of this can be online. And obviously, all of these information can be used for succession planning. It can be used for talent audits, building your pipelines, and making sure that your teams are effective. Now, very important over here, I think Liz did put up a poll to ask you the particular question. Where do you currently find yourself, either as an individual or as an organization, when it comes to resilience using the Kubler-Ross model? So please have a look at that and vote. It will be very interesting to see where you are.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, William. So we're going to have a short Q&A session. If you have questions for James or William, please use the chat function and we can then respond accordingly. And obviously, as indicated by William, we have released a little poll just to look at the Kubler-Ross change cycle so that we can see where you would pin your organization and where you would pin yourselves. So please respond to that when you can. Any questions? Okay. William, one question. Given that the corporate treadmill has stopped and employees have been forced to slow down, it is likely that many employees will question their purpose and their work might feel less meaningful. How do leaders ensure that their employees still feel valued to maintain engagement? It's a fantastic question.
Definitely so, Liz. Thank you very much, Jordan. Appreciate that. I think before I actually answer that question, I'm going to move into Sharon's territory. So perhaps, Jordan, if it is okay with you, that we can bank that question, because Sharon is going to talk about leadership and the role of leadership on disengaged people as well. And then we can answer that afterwards, if you don't mind.
Okay, fantastic. There's another question for James. James,
Yes.
can you give some tips for people who are single and in lockdown on their own?
Yes, Skype, Zoom, etc. Use the technology.
There you go. So it's about creating that communication network. It's about putting yourself out there. It's about connecting to your nearest and dearest. And as James has indicated, it's making tech work for you. These days, we are absolutely blessed with the number of channels that we can use to reach out to the outside world. And granted, I think the one thing that is prominent is that we are all pretty much in lockdown. So even those who are couples or have people with them, the fact that we are all isolated and are forced to use these channels of communication obviously assists us in maintaining that connection to the outside world and maintaining some level of sanity. Thank you, Gavin. Another question. That's a funny one, Leanne. The question is, which I'll just check. The question was, how do I deal with a husband in lockdown? I think what we need to do is an offline consultation in order to respond to that one. On that note, do you have a response for her? Right. So I'm going to now introduce our next speaker. Sharon Lefkowitz is a very near and dear friend of mine. We both work for the focus group, and she's a human capital management and development strategist who consults with both your small, medium enterprises and your large corporates in all strategic and operational HR management aspects of their business. Sharon is going to tackle the topic of virtual teams and how to create, manage, and lead these teams through this time of lockdown and beyond. Sharon, over to you.
Thank you, Liz, and I trust you can see my slides, right? Oops.
Yeah, show you up and running. Perfect.
Okay, good. Thank you, Liz, for putting together a fabulous webinar on focus on wellness, much needed at this time. My focus is really about giving the leader in the organization some guidelines on how best to manage virtual teams, to understand where their teams are hanging, the team members are hanging at the moment, and how they need to respond to that. What are some of the key tips on leading in lockdown? And then very importantly, how do you best engage your team when they're in their own space and you cannot really see them? So how do you manage their performance? We will then finish off with some legal elements surrounding COVID and contractual issues, etc., and looking at contractual alternatives and some other tips thrown in there. So first up is very much around Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm sure a lot of you are well aware of Maslow's motivational model. And the reality is during this time, given our anxieties, our unsureness, insecurities around whether we'll have a job tomorrow, whether our company will still exist, whether we can pay our bond or our car, whether we can put food on the table. It goes as far as, you know, do we go to the shops? Don't we? What about our health? Do we have some symptoms? Which through anxieties, as my previous presenters have put, you know, there's lack of sleep. Sorry for the partners, even lack of sex sometimes, you know, given the anxiety. So we really are zoning in far more on our lower order needs than the higher order needs. Even if we think about love and belongingness, we're not used to being crammed in a tight space with people 24/7, even our loved ones. We might not have all our loved ones with us. Grannies, children don't have grannies and grandpas with them. You might, you know, divorced parents might not have their children with them. So all of these things have a significant effect on our being. And just a question to each one of you as a poll is, what level are you hanging at? You know, are you at physiological safety level? Where are you exactly? There's a poll that's just come up that Liz has asked you to click. And then very importantly, what level do you think your team members are at? I mean, let's look at that collectively. And I'd hazard a guess to say pretty much at the physiological safety security level. Everybody done that and submitted?
We are still receiving, yeah, we're still receiving. So we'll leave it on for about 2 minutes, Sha, and then people can respond.
All right, but I can continue.
You may indeed.
Okay, good. Patrick Lencioni talks about unhealthy or dysfunctional teams versus healthy teams. And the key aspect of managing teams in general, the foundational aspect, is trust. In an absence of trust, trust of you, the leader, trust of the company, distrust of you as the leader, distrust of the company, and even distrust of the team members leads to a fear of conflict. So we don't rock the boat, but we don't really say how we're feeling. And this unsureness results in a lot of ambiguity and clarity for a lot of us, and therefore a lack of commitment because we're so anxious about what's going on. When we're not involved, when we're not communicated with, when our feelings are not considered, when our issues, our concerns are not debated, we're not going to be committed. So you're not going to get the most out of your people during these times. So ideally, you want to make sure that the difficult issues are dealt with, that they're brought to the table, they discussed, they debated. Also set very clear guidelines around accountability and commitment. Picking up on a previous question, how do you make sure people deliver? We'll talk about that. But very importantly, as the leader, go first and be vulnerable. Show your vulnerability, show your anxiety, show your concerns, show that you're sitting with your pajamas on and that you actually didn't get up and bath today. That's okay, because that shows your realness, gives people the comfort in then wanting to be part of the team, wanting to be committed. And ultimately, don't focus on individual gains or individual results. Always look towards the bigger picture and the bigger team deliverables. So in the context of trust, all your team needs is your trust, the companies and their team members. We define trust as reliability of truth, ability of someone or something, relations to have to be built on trust, confidence, belief, etc. So show your vulnerability, your openness, keep communication going all the time. I don't mean 24/7, but regular, meaningful engagements. Talk about how people are feeling, how your team is feeling, what are their concerns, what are their personal circumstances. And also bring some positivity, because very important in times like these, we need to think about progression rather than regression. We need to think about different ways of working, and I'll touch on that in a second. So what does it take to lead in lockdown? Firstly, listen. Listen. Put on those big ears, the two big ears that God gave us and one mouth, and listen to what your people are saying. Be mindful for those hidden cues, those hidden messages, and don't be afraid to probe those. Either have team meetings discussing that, or call the individual one-on-one to say, I picked up something, let's talk about it. Show your empathy, show your encouragement, show your positivity, but don't detract from, if they're working from home, accountability. Be clear on what is it that you want, what are your expectations, what is the direction, and be very clear on the detail required and the deliverables, because we can't manage through attendance anymore. We don't know who's showing up today unless we call them up. So be clear on what you want and hold them accountable. And lastly, right through support, guide, coach, counsel, specifically people dealing with difficult personal circumstances, kids, spouses, closeness, anxieties, etc. So if we look at team motivation through team engagement, what we want to do is, again, I've mentioned, be your true self. Be real, be vulnerable, but also be clear on what your expectations are. Then invest time in nurturing your relationships. This is the best time to be doing that. We're so busy in the busyness of business at work, in the office, distractions, that we don't have time to actually spend meaningful time with people. Find out more about your people. Get to know them. Send out fun Facebook exercises. Tell us about yourself. What's your favorite animal, your favorite drink, etc., etc. That tells us a little bit more, brings in the humor as well. Set work and team rituals. So have a daily stand-up, leaders, every day at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, where you're checking in. How have we gone yesterday? What worked? What didn't work? What still needs to be done? So that also helps you with a regular check-in. Also, regular one-on-one team meetings. Great way is, on Monday, tell me what you're going to work on this week. On Wednesday, let's do a check-in. And then on Friday, give us a summary. So once a week, you've got a 30-minute or 20-minute one-on-one with each team member. If you've got large teams, then you've got to allocate those out to more senior people. And then very importantly, it's not all about business. You know, when you get onto a Zoom meeting, try and have a little bit of virtual chit chat. Okay. Also, I've mentioned, understand the individual at home, what their challenges are, their tasks, the multitasking kids, etc. Then the role of the team member. Again, be very clear on what is their involvement, what is their contribution to the bigger picture, the bigger objective, and hold them accountable. With the team, always bring in the synergy, bringing back to what is our purpose, what are we doing, what is our focus, have some fun, have some virtual discussions, virtual coffee chats. You know, somebody asks, what do I do about being left at home on my own? Create dates with your friends and your friends that are more than friends, you know, have virtual dates. So this is a virtual opportunity. With communication, be careful around communication etiquette. You know, if we on WhatsApp groups, be very mindful of overload. Stick to what the group's about. Try and put one message in totality into your post. If you're going to leave the group, be mindful and respectful and explain why you're leaving. So just be mindful of how we use those WhatsApp groups. I'll talk a bit about holding meetings and technology and the various chat groups, but I think you're all familiar with that, be it Zoom or Skype or MS Teams. Those all work very well. And have some synergy, some team synergy, some team building exercises, activities that you could do collectively, even if it is getting together and doing some exercise together. And then lastly is, very importantly, in the NWOW state that we find ourselves, new ways of working, more so than ever before. You know, Agile, it might have coined NWOW, but boy, oh boy, we have to reinvent ourselves. So as leaders, you have such a great opportunity to work with your team, particularly where productivity is down and we can't get to everything because we just don't have our clients, our suppliers in check, etc. Is look at ways in which you can do things differently. Look at new ways of working, look at new opportunities, do that SWOT analysis and identify for the team what you know you could look at as a team. Also, be mindful of the groups that you put together. Don't group people who aren't a collective. In terms of running meetings, just some quick pointers. Try and get documentation out ahead and pre-reads so that you don't waste time. Keep on the agenda, share the screen so that people are focused. Video is very important. It's very easy to get lost on other emails, etc. If you don't have people on video, it improves attention. Ensure meetings are inclusive, listen to everybody, and make sure as the leader you facilitate involvement and input from everybody. Take time to pause, always a good thing. Maybe somebody's facing technical issues, you want to check in on that. Share documents, don't express frustration with somebody online, make sure that you keep minutes of meetings, and just make sure that the meetings are short, to the point, and productive. What not to do, some key points is just don't micromanage. Don't expect that people are there 24/7 waiting for you on demand. I think be flexible on working hours, maybe set a call of 10 till 2 is when we work. And then you make up the balance as you see fit as individuals. So be mindful of people's home circumstances. All right. And then also don't sit back and wait for people to tell you how they're feeling. Reach out, but don't micromanage. All right. And then keep on with feedback. Some work from home policies. I'm sure some of you or most of you working at home would have had some guidelines from your employers. But just as a point, and I just want to take the top 4, is an important note is in terms of the Section 8 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, we as employers have to make sure that the working environment that the employee is working in is safe. It's free of risk as such. The extent of the safeness, we're not going to debate now. Part 4 and 5 of King's 4 talks about risk governance. As a board, you should be setting up subcommittees, probably that deals with business continuity management, to discuss how people should be working from home. What are some of the challenges? What if they lose connectivity? What if they don't have the equipment? And then likewise, an employee has an onus to behave safely in their workplace at home, to self-isolate to a certain degree if they're going shopping, be mindful of looking after their health, because obviously as an important resource, we don't want to lose that. And then also as companies, you've got to determine who is an essential service, who is not. Is it the whole company? Is it certain positions, and how those will be managed? But then there's other questions there that we'll share with you later, just in terms of questioning, is it valid to have somebody working from home? Some considerations. Probably the more contentious is the contractual alternatives, and I'll run through it quickly because time is of essence. Ideally, we want to, government is employing our employers to pay employees, nurture the assets, because the ultimate opportunity cost of losing them, retrenching them, having to replace down the line is far greater. What if a company temporarily lays me off or puts me on short time? Well, there's the temporary employee relief scheme that the government, through the Disaster Management Regulations and Act, is urging employers to access for funding to pay in full or in part, if it's short time, the balance of the earnings. Obviously, there's certain limitations, but this is employers having to apply for this funding and then pay over the funding to the employee. But again, government urges at least to pay the minimum wage of 3,500 Rand to employees to cover them in the interim. There's also SMME funding, there's Oppenheimer funding for small businesses through your banks. If you haven't accessed those as small employers, you need to be doing so. Can an employee take annual leave? There was an initial call that employers could insist that employees take annual leave. That's not the case, but of course, if an employer cannot pay, annual leave is encouraged. That's for the 21 days, the 3 weeks, but what about thereafter? Thereafter, as individuals, we could claim UIF ourselves, and there are guidelines on the UIF website for both the TERS and the UIF claims, but there are 2 separate claims. The UIF claim is by the employee themselves. What if I contract COVID and I cannot work during this lockdown? Well, COVID is actually an occupational disease. So the COIDA, Old Workmen's Compensation claim, could be applied for, or ideally there needs to be some sick leave coverage there. Other alternatives for companies to consider: deferred compensation. I know we don't want to all hear this, but no bonus paid to cover, no increases. Companies could also look at a deferred training allowance to encourage people who are not working full-time to do some training, so some sort of a not a bursary, but an educational training allowance. So in summary, I think as leaders, don't expect too much. Your employees are not going to be working Saturday and Sunday. And be flexible. I think 75–80% productivity is really great during this time. And just be mindful of the individual and balance that against the company deliverables. So that's me in summary. I don't know how the poll turned out, Liz. Oh, you on silent, Liz? You on mute?
Right, I am about to share those results. Hi, everyone, and the results have been shared.
Okay, interesting.
Right. Very interesting.
Very interesting. So definitely the safety, the security, the job security, the house, but physiological, yes, most certainly, and less on the love and belongingness, but obviously important for connection, for communication. So good. I'm pleased to see somewhat self-actualization. That's encouraging. There's hope after all.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Right, so we're moving on to our fourth speaker. Actually, we've got a Q&A that is due for this time, but because we are cognizant of time, what I'd like to do is keep those Q&A or the Q&A session for once we've wrapped up this event, just to allow time for the speakers, because I know that many of you obviously have allocated up until 1:30 for us. So I'd like to get through the presentations as quickly as possible so that you get that information download. So our next speaker is Ashleigh Caradas, and she is a qualified dietitian with 15 years experience in private practice. She's also a registered yoga teacher and a health journalist. Ashleigh gives regular talks and workshops to corporates, and she's going to share her knowledge on mental, physical, and nutritional wellness. Over to you, Ash.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
It's going to pop up shortly. We can see you. Yet.
So you can't see my slides yet?
Not yet.
And you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm not sure why.
Want me to slide you?
Maybe. I can try one more time. Okay.
Bang, well done.
Great. Hi, everyone. So this is a really challenging time for our emotional and physical well-being. I'm sure you all agree. Also a very challenging time for companies. And I think, you know, moving forward, physical health, nutrition, and exercise are going to start becoming more important in a corporate environment. And I think this has triggered it, that it's not only the non-communicable diseases, but the communicable diseases now as well that we have to worry about. And our physical and emotional health is very important. So I feel, you know, as a nutritionist, that nutrition is very important to overall health. But it goes hand in hand with stress management and with exercise. So just to touch a little bit on mental and emotional wellness first, because it ties in with nutritional wellness and immunity. So most people are not very good at processing their emotions. So we end up turning to whatever offers instant gratification, and food is one of the easier of the so-called numbing agents. So we know that most emotions and most feelings are actually very transient. And if we are, you know, if you are an emotional eater and you're someone that neglects your health during these times, to just sit with your emotions and sit with your feelings and try to see if you can let them just go over you like a wave. And a lot of the time it does dissipate before you've reached for your sugary treat or whatever it is. So these are very important things, and to find healthier ways to self-soothe that aren't food related. So it could be anything from going to take a bath or phoning your best friend or phoning your mom, just anything that distracts you from that emotional eating. So, oh, something just popped up. I can't seem to do the next slide for some reason. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
You can.
You can.
Okay. So we just need to, when it comes to emotional eating, to get out of that that vicious cycle of going for the instant gratification, feeling better, and then actually in the long term feeling worse about it, because then we develop guilt and the cycle goes on and on. So many of us will complain about cravings, and cravings come from that psychological place, but also from a physiological point of view. So skipping your meals, not preparing foods, or just having a lack of a certain nutrient like magnesium or something like that, can actually be the source of your cravings as well. So it's good to look at all of that kind of stuff. Liz, I don't know if you want to show my other slides.
Are you locked there?
I'm locked, yeah.
That's bizarre.
Not sure why.
Let me see if I can get it right for you. Stand by.
So,
is it better?
I don't see anything from your side.
Yeah, coming up now. 3, 2, 1.
Great.
No, I'm also battling here.
Okay, well, let's just chat anyway. So stress is a very complex hormonal response that can mean different things for different people. So generally, when we stress, we produce adrenaline, and that adrenaline prepares us for fight or flight. So the body wants to do something. The problem is that a lot of the time we're just kind of sitting on our butts, worrying. At this time, you know, we're quite immobile, and even when we go back to the office, we're often sitting in our car, so we don't process our stress. And what happens is we produce the adrenaline, and then we produce another hormone called cortisol. And cortisol has a lot of negative effects on the body. It has some positive effects, but what happens is this constant stressing causes changes in our cortisol levels, and we have a continuous like output of cortisol. So cortisol itself can increase appetite, weight gain, and has other negative health consequences that are related to our overall well-being in terms of our nutritional well-being. So cortisol can affect our ability to process sugar. It affects our insulin. So when we're stressed, we actually can't process our food as well as normal. It also causes a diversion of blood from the digestive system to the muscles and brain. So we also end up just not being able to digest our food as well as we should. It affects our blood pressure. So, you know, hypertension is also a big problem in South Africa, and so that's also something that we need to be aware of. So that's the diagram there that we are speaking about. I'm not sure if you can make it bigger. So another thing that stress affects is our brain chemicals, our cognition, all sorts of, there we go, the neurochemistry, decreases our dopamine, decreases our serotonin. So you can see here how stress affects the body and how it affects the systems that are affected by nutrition as well. That's why good nutrition is so important during stressful situations. Okay, so the topic I want to talk about now is diet and immunity. So this is quite a big trending topic. So I want to start with 3 nutrients that are being studied that probably have the biggest impact on our viral immunity and also immunity with regards to respiratory infections. And those are vitamin D, vitamin C, and zinc. So it's not to say that we necessarily need to supplement with these nutrients. I do personally, but they are very important. So vitamin D, getting that sunshine every day, going out for 20 minutes of direct sunshine, eating your fruit and vegetables for vitamin C, and possibly taking a zinc supplement, because the research is pointing towards that it really does help with this kind of viral immunity. When it comes to the food we eat, it's extremely important to eat a lot of plants. So a plant-based way of eating definitely is our greatest protection. So when it comes to plants, there's so many different kinds, but I just want to touch basically on a couple of groups. So the one is our cruciferous vegetables, which is like your cauliflower, broccoli, and cabbage. So these veggies are major detoxifiers and have an effect on immunity. It's very interesting also that broccoli looks like the alveoli in the lungs, and there are studies going on at the moment using broccoli seed extract for respiratory disorders. Also your dark green leafy, that's your kales and your cabbage and your spinach. Your orange veggies, so that can be anything from papaya to carrots for beta carotene, as beta carotene also has a major effect on our immunity. Your vitamin C rich foods, which is like your citrus fruits and your berries and those kind of things. So it's across the board, like we need a lot of different types of fruits and vegetables. That's why getting to this 5 a day is so important. And it really is the basis of a healthy diet. So I always say, like, a plant-based diet is probably healthier for us, but it doesn't mean vegetarian. It can mean that most of your food is plants. So instead of having a big chunk of meat and a small salad, you might have a very large salad and a smaller amount of meat. Having said that as well, protein is also super important for our immune system, because those little amino acids that the protein breaks into is actually what makes our immune cells and what makes our hormones. So when somebody's not eating enough protein, that is an issue. So the slide over here is showing how sugar affects our immunity. So a lot of people don't know this, but when we have sugar in the blood, it literally coats the blood cells. So that's our white blood cells, red blood cells, etc. So our white blood cells that we need for immunity are now, they're competing, the sugar's competing. So what's happening is they're absorbing sugar and they don't have enough space to absorb what they need. Like, for example, in this diagram, we're showing how a white blood cell is absorbing 50 times more vitamin C than when it's only 13 times the amount when there's a certain amount of sugar in the blood. So, and what a lot of people don't understand about sugar is that it's not just sugar. It's also our processed carbohydrates that turn to glucose very fast, that also create this kind of high sugar content in the blood. This is why diabetics have a lowered immunity. It's one of the reasons, because they can't get the blood sugar down as fast as we can, who have, don't have problems with insulin. But then if you throw stress into the mix, and the fact that a lot of people are probably insulin resistant without knowing it, sugar can really be something that is affecting our immunity in a big way. It's also the most abused thing when we're stressed and emotional. So I think this is a big challenge for a lot of people in terms of their immunity. So yes, in terms of food, there's some other foods that I would like to also just touch on that are really great for immunity. Your garlic and onions. So garlic and onions are super good for respiratory wellness and also just for general detoxification, high antioxidants and phytochemical properties. And then also your turmeric and ginger are really great to use now. You can use it in the root form or in the powder form, add it to teas and things like that. So besides your other groups, these are really important immune boosters. Okay, so basically just want to chat a little bit from a point of view of a business now. So this is a lot of stuff. This is an individual stuff, what you put into your mouth. But now what do you do for your staff? So a lot of work environments don't really cater for healthy eating and exercise. So a lot of businesses might not have gyms. They might not have healthy options at the canteen. They might not have canteens at all. And a lot of the time there's no programs in place to actually motivate people. So somebody might be coming from home, they've skipped breakfast, and all there is a vending machine and toasted cheeses, and this is what people are going to gravitate towards. It's also very difficult to get people to make the healthy choices, but I think if you've got something in place and the education is there and people are understanding the value, and from the point of view of a business, the productivity value is undeniable. If somebody is eating well, is feeling in control of their emotions and feeling in control of their diet, is getting enough exercise, they are going to be more productive and they're going to be happier. So it's to put things in place, educational things, and actual physical implementation where there is stuff where people have access to healthy food or access to some form of exercise they can do. Okay, and just to wrap up my section, I want to chat about some practical tips. So Liz, you can do my slide. There we go. Okay, so guys, be kind to yourself. This is not a 21 days to, you're not emerging from these 21 days, this like perfect human being who's exercising for an hour a day and eating completely perfectly. This is about your health and your safety, and it's about not getting into bad habits. Things have changed, and a lot of the time what's happening is people are now neglecting what they actually should be nurturing. So this is a very difficult time, but it's also a time it's an opportunistic time to really change things. And like a lot of the other guys have said, create a routine. Create a routine around meal times for you and your family, around exercise as well. Make that a priority, and also downtime. When am I going to relax? When am I going to practice my self-care? Also shopping smart. So at the moment, shopping's a little bit of a difficult thing to navigate, but there's things that you can do. There's online shopping. You can phone your local fruit and veg, and they can help you out. Learning to prep ahead of time. This is a big thing for now and moving forward. Now we have more time to actually put into our cooking, but you'll see, when you're back at work and things are moving a bit, pre-prepping your meals is an amazing thing to do that really, really helps. Regarding actual diet stuff, getting your 5 fruits and veggies a day and including those immune boosting foods that I spoke about is imperative. Understanding your macros, which is basically your carbs, proteins, and fats. And we're not going to talk about that in any lengthy way because it's too much of a broad topic. But knowing which carbs are the ones that act more like sugar in your system, which ones are healthier for you and actually sustain your energy better. How much protein do you need, and are you putting that into practice? Are you eating your good fats and minimizing your burnt fats and your animal fats, etc.? And then the last practical tip is to unleash your creativity. So this is a time to actually really be creative. Start to find new ways to exercise. Maybe you've only got a square meter to do it. Maybe you're going to subscribe to some channels where there's exercise. Get involved in group exercise classes with some friends. Get creative with recipes. Go online and look into recipes. Start to get the whole family involved, or even if you're on your own, learning to cook or getting more into that kind of stuff, because it really is an opportunity to practice that and start finding creative ways also to manage your stress. Start to practice the little things, be it the meditation or the breathing exercises, and really use this time to its fullest and to get the most out of it that you can.
Right, thank you very much, Ash. Thank you, thank you. I'm very cognizant of the fact that it is 1:28. I am going to do my utmost best to go through this concept of maximizing human potential as quickly as possible. So Ash, can you, I've got the slide share, so that's actually great. Right, so my section is maximizing human potential. And the question is, how do we go about doing this? In this unpredictable environment that we are operating in, practices that both help us to slow down and speed up in ways that complement each other can help to shift the paradigm from a state of stress and survival to one of excitement and vitality. I think over time, the fundamental shifts that we are now facing is very much it's shrinking of time spans. It's large part due to an exponential change in technology, which is coupled with an instantaneous propagation of ideas and information across a very connected world. So if we think about time, time is speeding up. Things that took decades now take years. Things that took years now take months. And those that took months take weeks and so forth. And in the organizational environment, while shift is disrupting established businesses and business models, it's laying the foundation for new business models and blueprints, and models that are probably better adapted to this fast-paced economy that we find ourselves in. So as individuals, we are also experiencing this shift. There's an accelerating pace of change, and the relevance and the validity of the ability to know the theory is diminished, while other more practical abilities such as creativity and empathy, the ability to read context and learn new skills and apply these learnings in real time becomes really, really important. So like organizations, we too need to develop new practices and capabilities that are adapted to the times that we're living in now. So with this in mind, what we propose in Maximizing Human Potential is a set of what we call proactive practices that can help to shift the paradigm as we face the unknown and the unpredictable, from stress and survival to that state of excitement and vitality. These practices include those things that allow you to slow down and sink down and re-anchor yourselves, otherwise known as roots. And we also believe that root practices can have more value. And it's not just when used proactively, but when used in conjunction with other practices. And examples include developing a diverse social media network, traveling, and adopting a more spontaneous way of life to speed up and explore these new arenas for learning and growth. We call these speeding up practices shoots. Now, by connecting roots and shoots practices, individuals have the potential to not only gain focus and improve well-being and become more productive, adaptable, and capable of learning across changing contexts, but they also become more empathetic, more creative and flexible in creating new approaches and adapting old ones to sustain themselves over a career and over their lifetime. Now, while it's up to the individual to pursue this practice of self-mastery, organizations also play a very important part by providing environments that accelerate this adoption of practices. This in turn allows the development of a workforce that can bring these characteristics of creativity and curiosity and reflection and resilience to the challenges of a changing and very unpredictable space that we are operating in. And this in essence leads to increased productivity and improved performance and output. So let's unpack this roots and shoots analogy. Think of the individual as a tree. It's rooted to the ground through a system which anchors it into soil and rock. The roots absorb the nutrients and the water, and they also provide stability. These are all essential for a tree's health and growth. A strong tree also has branches that shoot out for new growth and spread upwards and outwards. And it's through these shoots that the tree collects sunlight for photosynthesis, and obviously also it's essential for the tree's health and growth. Now, these roots and shoots are both vital. They're not just necessary, but they're interdependent, and they form a cycle. And this offers a great analogy to think about the simultaneous need in our lives to cycle between slowing down, sinking our roots, and speeding up, being our shoots, if we want to maintain a state of health and vitality. So growth is actually the key differentiating factor in this framework. Many practices focus on health, and this is often defined as recovery from or resistance to stress in all the ways that it manifests in our lives. There's no doubt that health alone, or the absence of harm, disease, or what we say dis-ease, is a compelling goal all unto its own. And if you simply look at the global reaction to prevent the spread of COVID-19, it's a key example of this. Many of us, whether or not we want to acknowledge it, do want something more than just health and the absence of pain. Growing up, no doubt, we aspired to be someone or achieve certain things in our lives. And most of us still do. This is at the heart of the framework, the trunk of our tree, the fundamental reason to engage in the roots and shoots practices in order to unlock our potential. So the key understandings of the roots and shoots framework is that these two practices of slowing down and speeding up, so slowing down being the roots, speeding up being the shoots, are actually complementary and not contradictory. And this leads us to the next concept, and that is the one of balance. So balance, and specifically this work-life balance that we're all very familiar with, often seems to be the goal. However, this is quite an elusive goal, specifically when we are trying to develop practices around our work and our life. Our lives are often anything but balanced, with the necessity to sustain our bodies, our hearts, our minds, and our souls across the various chapters of our lifetime. The question is balance the only or even the right goal that we should be chasing? Let's think about in moments of unhappiness. We tend to polarize things and notice a great imbalance and think that balance is the answer. But for many of us, in thinking about our careers and aspirations, the ways we assess ourselves and find meaning, progress or impact might be as necessary for sustaining ourselves as balance. So if balance isn't necessarily the goal, what is? So the research around personal practices for times of exponential change tends to be divided between those slowing down processes, or the roots, and the speeding up practices, which are the shoots. What's more is that these are often seen as mutually exclusive, and they're disconnected and at odds to each other. So on one side of the coin are practices for slowing down. Examples include mindfulness, meditation, or taking a simple digital detox. The answers are in there, they say, if you can shut out the distractions long enough to listen. On the flip side of the coin are practices for speeding up. That's doing more, getting more, becoming more, being faster, being stronger, being better. And they say that the answers are out there and there are digital tools to give those to you. They're within reach. The only question is, what is stopping you? So both sides of the coin are responding to the increasing pressures that we feel in the current times. The goal of the first is to mitigate and recover from the actual pressures of an always-on, fast-moving, competitive world. The goal of the second is the need to achieve, the need to stay relevant and competitive in a faster-paced world where safety nets and social contracts are pretty much in short supply. Seemingly, these are irreconcilable, and each goal points to a different practice. So if we take our goal as sustainable, long-term performance, the practices for slowing down and speeding up can actually be seen as complementary rather than contradictory. So slowing down practices have been shown to improve creativity, persistence, and empathy. speeding up practices fuel curiosity. It uncovers new resources. It exposes us to new ideas and contexts, and it proves relevant to our own domain or pursuits. Both are absolutely critical to the ability to engage in the type of learning that we believe will be increasingly important in the workforce. And that is that which creates new knowledge through insights, techniques, and approaches, in contrast to assimilating existing stocks of knowledge. So if you take these together, the slowing down and the speeding up, from where we refer, if you take the slowing down and the speeding up, this is something that we refer to as individual elasticity. It's a flexibility of a system and its ability to respond. This individual elasticity borrows from it the concept of resilience, which is defined as being able to become stronger, not just to survive and bounce back as a result of stresses to the system. This strong, flexible, responsive system, which is our individual elasticity, comes from cultivating both the ability to slow down and the ability to speed up, which is a principle that's very evident in the Chinese yin-yang philosophy, where they state that opposites or contrary forces are actually complementary and interconnected and interdependent. Right, so while different life and career stages may dictate a greater need for some practice over others at any given time, it's imperative for individuals to have the ability to slow down and speed up, and to develop an array of slowing down and speeding up practices to draw on over the course of a lifetime to develop their and maximize their potential. So the question is, how do we go about unlocking this potential? And it's through this process of unlearning and learning. There's a great quote that says, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be the man who cannot read and write. It will be the man who has not learned how to learn and unlearn." So it's our contention that learning and unlearning, which together lie at the heart of growth, occur through this interplay of the roots and shoots. Learning and unlearning occurs at basically two levels. Firstly, we have to learn and adopt new practices, as well as, an equally important and perhaps a little bit more difficult, is to unlearn and stop executing old practices that are no longer serving us. Second to this, in order to pursue growth, we need to acknowledge that the point of engaging in new practices is to learn new skills and approaches that are relevant and that are going to be able to serve us in the future. So by adopting a roots and shoots practices and going through cycles of learning and unlearning, you can most definitely discover purpose and passion. So moving on, if we are looking at this balancing, this feedback system, it's through this branching and the circling back and this aggregation of skills and knowledge flows that we can actually discover that sense of purpose and cultivate our passion. The interplay between the roots and shoots and the focus of the practices themselves help us to unlearn mental models and ways of operating that are no longer useful. And it allows us to learn skills and capabilities that are relevant to our future lives. We don't have all the answers. We hope to start a conversation and to provide a framework for thinking about the options and how they support you, the individual, and your organizational goals. So ideally, roots and shoots practices, it's not just a reaction to stress, grab like lifelines as you take on life's challenges head on. Rather, they are proactive tools assembled with deliberation in order to better realize your full potential. So we want to look at how do we go into, I'm just going to shoot through there quickly. So practices to unlock your potential, what are those and how do we apply that to our day-to-day lives? And I'm just going to brush over them very quickly. So if you look at the bottom of the slide deck, you will see that there are 3 what we call root practices. These are replenishing and re-energizing, it's reflecting and reframing, and it's reconnecting. We then have your shoots at the top, and those are action, it's adjusting and learning, and it's amplification and acceleration. Now, how do we incorporate these concepts into our lives? So replenishing and re-energizing, it's about taking time, literally. It's about creating that stopgap. It's about taking time out from pressures and the busyness of life that we are sucked into on a day-to-day basis. And it's about spending time exploring the foundation of your roots. It's a time that allows us to obviously replenish and rejuvenate, and it gives us space to be more effective, creative, curious, and resourceful. Now, essentially, as has been highlighted by my team, proper nutrition and hydration and sleep are critical aspects of this part of replenishing and re-energizing. Sleep itself, a little side note, is a time during which the body rejuvenates itself, and a lack of sleep has disastrous effects on productivity. One reason being that, and it's also a side note, 70% of your growth hormone is produced while you sleep. And this hormone is responsible for your heart function, your muscle growth, your fat and sugar metabolism, water retention, and it impacts your energy levels. So if your sleep patterns have gone awry, all of the previously mentioned physiological systems will suffer. So how do we go about shutting out this busyness? There are a few practical tips. You can practice mindfulness, so develop practices around meditation. You can engage in energy and attention management, so being very selective as to where you focus your attention. Implementing a digital detox, which is something I do regularly. On the weekends, I often switch off my cell phone, so I'm not available at all. It's great to have a break from that constant connection to the outside world. And it's also your ability to say no. So it's making conscious decisions to forego some potential opportunities. Looking at reflecting and reframing. Specifically in times of rapid change, such as we are experiencing with COVID, the past may no longer predict the future. And it's the very things that made us successful pre-COVID that might actually be to our detriment and downfall post-COVID. And in such times, we need practices that help us to adopt new perspectives and to, again, do away with those things that no longer serve us and adopt new ways and patterns of behavior that do serve us. So a few practical tips. How do you reflect and reframe? The one thing you can do is to practice deep introspection. So just spending time with yourself and exploring your own values, your motivations, and the behavior through your practices can also be unpacked by attending a life coaching session, or obviously by seeing a therapist. Journaling and storytelling is another fantastic way to refine your thoughts and ideas by putting them down on paper, and also engaging in deep discourse, those great DMCs. So pressure testing and cementing ideas and concepts through one-on-one discussions is another great way to reflect and reframe. So reconnecting, and that's something that we are all doing right now. Deep roots ground us, and in this lockdown period, many of us are now back within a familial unit. So connecting to our core values and principles provides touch points and affirmations of what really matters. So it's the communities that surround us and provide safety and stability, as well as avenues for dialogue, reflection, and reframing that become so important. So things that you can do to spark that reconnection, there are things like communities of interest, where you can participate in niche communities dedicated to deep exploration of topics. Or there are things called communities of practice. And these are religious communities or skills-based communities, which are fantastic to rejuvenate and replenish knowledge. Now, if we just shoot to the top of the slide, looking at and shoot to the shooting practices, action is critical. So by participating in flows and gathering data and experiences, we learn about ourselves and our environment. And being proactive and deliberate rather than reactive is a key differentiating factor here. So it's about making space for action, simply getting more active, as in getting that body moving for 30 minutes a day is all that is required to support a state of health and vitality. Planning open time. So creating spaces in your schedule to allow for unplanned events. I myself am very much a planner, and there are times where I actually just block out parts in my diary so that I can go and see friends, spend time with family, not right now during lockdown, but post and pre. So while the social distancing obviously prevents physical meetings, we have those technology platforms that we have discussed at length that provide other channels to achieve this goal. And the other thing is to say yes. So obviously when you are replenishing and re-energizing, you say no. But when you are being active and you want to shape serendipity, you say yes. And it's about being open to random opportunities that are outside of the norm. Our second last aspect is adjusting and learning. Now, learning cycles, especially now, need to be rapid and iterative. With each exploratory action in the shoots, the experience and information gathered is used to assess and adjust the short-term learning focus. So it's similar to how a gardener prunes and uses stakes to shape growth. One's next exploratory shoots look different as a result. So how do we do this? It's about practice failing. It's about shifting parameters and repackaging risks. It's about focusing on process and practice, not perfection. And it's about putting yourself out of your comfort zone. And that may include travel. It may include an extreme physical challenge. I'm very happy to give you one of my great bootcamp workouts if you so wish. And it's also periodic deprivation. And that is something that we are actually experiencing right now. And then amplifying and acceleration. So this is obviously finding leverages to help actions have greater impact. And ways that we can incorporate that into our lives is about maintaining a broad social network. It's about breaking out of that echo chamber and including acquaintances with differing views, rather than limiting oneself to your current network and the space that you already know, your close friends and your family. It's also about exploring new topics, you know, attending classes or conferences of an unfamiliar topic. And all of these are ways that you can incorporate both these roots and shoots practices into your lives. Now, there's no one right set of practices. The idea is that each individual will need to assemble his or her own set of practices to collectively support the learning and unlearning in a way that is relevant to your life. The relevant practices may also change over time, and it obviously depends on a number of factors. But ideally, each person will be able to adopt practices both small and large, and those that will shape our minutes and years to come in order to continuously build the capacity for learning and growth. So thank you very much. This journey with you has taken us through 5 critical elements that are necessary for organizations, teams, and individuals to better understand our current state of lockdown, as well as provide both theoretical and practical advice to inform decisions to assist us in navigating this very unpredictable future. We would like to thank you so much for connecting with us today, and we wish you the very best of luck as we move through these times which are filled with opportunities. At this point, I'm very cognizant of the fact that it's 1:51. For those of you who would like to stay on and engage in a Q&A with us, please feel free to do so. For those of you who are expecting us to finish at 1:30, I do apologize that we went slightly over. There was so much information that we wanted to share with you, and we truly hope that you enjoyed this webinar. I'm going to now switch over to the Q&A section. So I'm going to see what questions have come up, and we can then attend to those. Team, are you standing by? Okay, yes. Fantastic. All right. Right, so I actually made a note of some questions that were asked earlier on. Shall we look at what's happened here first while I just check in quickly with the chat? Right, so questions that came up. One question is, how do you get a difficult employee who has very low emotional intelligence to stay engaged with the team if they are further isolated by working from home? It's a great question.
Right, I think maybe Liz, if I can answer that one.
Yes,
obviously, that it seems to be that was a problem even prior to the COVID lockdown. So the real challenge there is to identify within emotional intelligence, there are various components. Where exactly is the person disengaged? If you say that the person shows a low level of EQ, where exactly is it in terms of understanding his or her own emotion, or is it in terms of relating to other people, or is it in terms of the outlook on life, in terms of dealing with stresses, or is a person pessimistic or optimistic? I think the first step will be to identify exactly where that person is in terms of the overall scope of emotional intelligence, and try then to zoom on. Let me give you an example. For instance, if the person has got a low EQ from an interpersonal relationship, the person does not know how to relate to others well, the person does not show empathy, is to start to engage with that person on that particular level by posing questions from a reflective perspective. For instance, I can see that you are quite frustrated during this particular period in time. I can see that you are disengaged. Throw it out there, try to get some response from the individual, and then to further engage with that person on that particular level. The challenge here is to always stay with where that person is at that relevant point in time. So if the person is sharing emotions or just sharing facts, use your communication skills to drill down into the emotion, because that is the only area that we can start to create change. Not on a factual basis. I can say to the person, this is how you need to do it, or this is how you deal with the person. But if I'm not able to tap into the emotion of that person, I will not be able to create change or lead that person to that level of self-understanding so that they can regulate themselves from an emotional perspective. So my answer there, it is a long-winded answer, but the short part of it is understand where that person is from an emotional perspective. What creates that disconnect from an emotional point of view? Zoom into that challenge in terms of think or the emotion. Say what it is that you observe. Throw it out there. Look for the response, and then engage on that level of response to make them create more better understanding for themselves and try to move them from where they are currently into where they can be. So it's a matter of engaging, communicating, but don't leave them. Don't leave them. Don't isolate them further, because they're already isolated. That you need to engage.
Fantastic.
If
Thank you very much, William. We have another question. The question is it possible to have a buyer or procurement team working from home? Does it depend on what you buy?
I did answer the person on that. I mean, again, if you're in essential services, then your business continues, and we assume then your suppliers are available to supply you. If you are manufacturing food, again, you would assume the farmers are available to provide raw ingredients and your respective suppliers as part of essential services. If you are not, then always best to look at opportunities where the person can do some work. So look at a short-time option where they can then start to put together policies, procedures, systems, structures in place, and at least be partly productive and be partly paid.
Thank you, Cher. I have another question. The question is, how do you manage disciplinary issues under lockdown? For example, a virtual tantrum thrower. Could you give some advice?
Perhaps if Sharon can answer that.
So perhaps, again, it's building on what William said. It's about understanding where the person is at. Why are they throwing tantrums? Why are they not following due process, due procedure? So if we talk about email netiquette, you know, share that with the team so that there's a standard that everybody is applying. So very importantly, you share the guidelines and then you manage against that. But once you've really got to understand where the employee's at, what the team members' views are, what are their concerns, and you've listened, you've shown empathy, you've encouraged, you then need to be firm and frank and set the guidelines and what your expectations are and what you will allow and not allow, and then proceed from there. I think discipline just adds further anxiety, so that would be your last resort. And also you've got to weigh up the impact of what that person is doing on the team, on you, on the business. The more severe the impact, then of course discipline comes into play. But if it's just because they're having a tantrum, rather take it offline, have a one-on-one and agree some ground rules with the person.
Yeah. I'd also recommend that the manager just finds out there might be a personal issue as well, and then just put them in touch with EAP programs, a stress and anxiety group, something like that, or a psychologist or whatever, because maybe it can be solved in that way.
Yeah. So, I mean,
I think it's also
with any violence, domestic issues at home, and there are a lot of sources and lots of numbers where you can call for that type of
stuff. Okay.
Right. I'm going to do two more questions. The question is, and it's quite an applicable one right now, is it possible and should you be applying for jobs at this stage? Share?
Oh, I don't have to answer all the questions, but why not? There's opportunity. If employers are hiring and there's opportunity, why not? Use the time to reinvent yourself. Use the time to redo your LinkedIn profile, redo your CV, redo your motivation letter, do your research on prospective clients, do targeted recruitment, and of course, come to the focus group. We're there to help you, particularly with your specialist skills and roles in terms of marketing your CV to prospective clients.
Liz, if I can come in there as well, please, if you don't mind. I would also link that to Jordan's question earlier on, yes, in terms of the corporate treadmill, and people feel less meaningful, they are not adding value, there's no purpose. This whole pandemic actually allows one the opportunity to revisit not only the corporate environment or your business and strategy, but also on a personal level to visit your own strategy, your personal brand. Where are you? Because it is possible that one can actually start to feel, you know what, maybe I'm in the wrong position. Maybe this is not the right organization for me. Maybe I need to make a change. So it allows one to move on different levels. So obviously corporates would like to maintain or retain the competent workers. They don't want to lose people unnecessarily with this stage. But if the person feels that, you know what, really this is not working for me, I need to find other alternatives, obviously that is a good time to look at that as well. From a corporate perspective, to answer Jordan's question directly, how do leaders then ensure that these employers still feel valued? It's all about communication. As what we talked about earlier, again, know your people, know exactly why that person feels purposeless or meaningless, or why that person is disengaged. And the only way that you can do that is if you then start to engage individually, as James and Sharon mentioned earlier on. They need to talk on an individual basis to their people. Know your people, because the more you know about your people, what drives them, what makes them tick, what motivates them, the better your opportunity or the possibilities that you will be able to lead them through this process, where you can then, from a broader perspective, from a business perspective, create that meaning, create that purpose. Let the person understand that they are important to the organization, why they are important to the organization, and then create a bigger picture for themselves. You need to be the instrument as a leader to make that happen with the organization. Don't sit back and now say, but things will change. This person will eventually come around the block and see things the way that we see it. Don't take it like that. We need to engage our people consistently.
Right, I've got another question that was asked a while ago by Skoltz. How to get EXCO's buy-in as the MD does not even know what EQ is. William, this is directed at you.
Yeah, and that happens very often. And we experience that from an HR perspective or from an industrial psychology perspective, where people say, you know what, my managers should know about this. Why don't they? It's again, I think this is now the opportune time for any employee to start to engage up the organization. If you see things that people are now sitting at home, your managers are sitting at home, the MD is probably sitting at home now as well, cannot move anyway. So now is the opportunity to start to engage. And now is the opportunity to engage, not in terms of individual issues perhaps, but also then to say, but you know what, let's have a look at the business performance in the broadest sense. What are the factors that are really pulling us down? And that, through that discussion, one will eventually get to the point of what you do. You know what, our people's resilience is very important. And once a person understands that it is the people that will pull the organization through at this point in time, one can then start to open up that debate in terms of why is EQ important, or what can be done about this, or what can be done about that. Link it back in terms of the business strategy. If the company is not achieving the business strategy, see if there's a loop back into people and how the people can be successful, and create a picture for yourself. What is a successful organization from a people perspective, and link that into EQ, and that will open up the debate for you to discuss with your MD or even with EXCO. Another point to perhaps they engage with the EXCO who are positive about EQ. Perhaps there's one or two that you can side with, so that you can start to, you already sown the seed, now to cultivate that, perhaps with that individual. Get your partners on board so that you can become a stronger voice in this whole debate.
Thank you, William. Last question. Is TERS application applicable to permanent employees? The TERS application.
So that would be me.
Yes.
Only employers may apply for TERS. So it is a separate fund, part of UIF, but very separate to the UIF we know, where employers apply for either full salary or part salary, depending on what they've paid you. And the intention is that the UIF will then pay over to the employer the value for up to 3 months, no more than 3 months at this time. And then the employer has to show that they've paid it over to the employee. Technically, you cannot apply for that as well as UIF, but there's no clear guidelines on that at the moment. The employee can still go ahead and apply for UIF according to the normal channels. You can go on the UIF website. There's certain forms that you have to complete, your employer has to complete, and then you make application. That is only in the case of a temporary layoff or a full retrenchment, permanent layoff. Hope that's clear.
Thank you very much, Sharon. And on that note, again, I would like to thank those of you who are still with us for connecting with us today. And we wish you the very best of luck as we navigate this space together. Just a little note that we do offer consultation to both organizations and individuals alike, and we look forward to engaging with you on further on topics that we have mentioned today, and also on any topic in the space of workforce wellness. What we will be doing is we will be sending out an email. In that email, we will include a slide deck and a link to the recording of today's webinar. And on that note, I would like to thank you again for joining us. Stay home and stay safe.